The conference room on the fifth floor of St. Augustine Medical Center felt colder than a walk-in fridge. Fluorescent tubes hummed. One of them stuttered a white blink that cut across the glossy table. Dr. Elena Vega stood at the far end, palms resting lightly against the chairback boots planted on the hospital tile. They were desert boots. Sand scuffed along the welt, laces pulled tight. Not regulation for a place like this. Dr. Thomas Whitaker watched them with the faint smile of a man who had already decided the outcome. "Combat boots," he said. "Is that your look today, Dr. Vega?" Elena glanced down. The leather was clean, but the stitching still held a memory of dust. She had meant to change into clogs before the meeting. She had not. She straightened and lifted her eyes to Whitaker's. His reading glasses sat low on his nose. A manila folder lay open in front of him, pages squared to the edge like a case exhibit. He turned one page without looking at it. "We are a level 1 trauma center. We follow protocols. We respect supervision. You have been warned about going off book." Silence settled. The clock over the whiteboard ticked. Elena could hear the cooling system sigh in the vent. "Effective immediately," Whitaker said, and the words landed with a soft clack like a gavel on wood. "Your residency here is terminated." No one else spoke. Dr. Noah Patel shifted in his seat and kept his eyes on the table. Dr. Lila Monroe pretended to read the agenda. Whitaker closed the folder and tapped its spine into alignment. "The reasons are documented. Unauthorized procedures, insubordination, pattern of ignoring attending oversight." He tilted his head. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Elena touched the face of her watch with the pat of her thumb. The second hand hauled itself forward little jumps of chrome in the light. "No, sir. No apology, no explanation, nothing." "What would you like me to say?" Elena asked, her voice. "Even that I regret clearing an airway while your attending was scrubbed into another room, that I should have waited for permission and let a man die." Whitaker's smile thinned. "You performed a cricothyrotomy without authorization." "He had a total obstruction," Elena said. "No airflow. Cyanosis. 90 seconds before brain injury. He is alive." "Alive because of luck," Whitaker said. "Not because of you." He slid the folder aside. "You have until 8 to clear your locker. Security will escort you out. Human Resources will mail your final check." He paused. The light flickered again. "And Dr. Vega. Next time you interview, try to look like a doctor, not a soldier." Elena nodded. Understood. She stepped out. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and warm plastic. A cart squeaked past wheels, complaining. In the dark glass of a closed office, she caught herself an outline. Navy scrubs large in the shoulders, hair pulled low, the small-winged caduceus that lived on the inside of her left wrist, hidden beneath her watch band. The elevator down to the ground floor rattled as it started. Elena watched the numbers drop. Her stomach did not. The locker room was mostly empty. Running water in a sink somewhere. The clang of a door. Locker 312 had a stick of white tape on it with her name. She turned the dial without thinking. The door sprang easy. Inside were 3 sets of scrubs, a folded pair of jeans, a t-shirt travel toothpaste, a small wooden box wrapped in black cloth. The cloth was soft from handling. She had not unwrapped it in 6 months. Elena stood with her hands on the top rail and looked at the box. She could hear the hum of the building and the bones of the locker. On the far wall, a framed evacuation map with a bright red arrow and the words, "You are here." It had always felt like a joke. She pulled a duffel down from the top shelf and began to pack with hospital economy. Scrubs rolled tight and tucked to the side. The jeans slid against nylon. The duffel's zipper ran smooth beneath her fingers. She reached toward the black cloth and stopped. Not today. She closed the locker and slung the duffel over her shoulder. The door swung shut and the magnet caught. On her way past the procedure room, Elena paused. The door was open a few inches. A portable ultrasound sat on a rolling stand screen dark. A yellow sticker along the side read, "Property of Imaging" in block letters. A tiny LED pulsed on the battery panel. The unit chirped once, a quick high beep, like a bird waking up, then went quiet. "Out of juice again," someone muttered from inside. The overhead lights stuttered twice as the hospital did a morning generator test, the kind that made the floor feel like it shifted and then settled. Elena moved on. The corridor to the elevator bank was a ribbon of glare. Nurse Grace O'Malley came around the corner at speed, short red hair pinned back clipboard tucked to her ribs like a shield. Grace's shoes squeaked. She saw the duffel and her mouth tightened. "You're leaving," Grace said. Elena adjusted the strap. I am. Thomas pulled the trigger then. He did. Grace's eyes searched Elena's face. There was no pity in them, only calculation. She nodded once 2 millimeters of motion. 3 residents called out, Grace said. 2 attendings are stuck in the OR. The morning shift is thin. I'm not on staff, Elena said. You have hands, Grace said. A silence. The elevator arrived and the doors parted. Inside, the brushed metal reflected both of them pale and stretched. The doors closed again because no one moved. People need care, Grace said softly. Elena looked at the seam where the doors met. Her watch hand ticked. The duffel strap bit into her shoulder. She could taste the stainless in the air. She shook her head. They will manage. Grace did not argue. She stepped back a pace and let Elena pass her. The hallway made a small wind of its own as someone opened the stairwell up the line. The ultrasound in the procedure room chirped again, a tired bird trying one more time. Elena reached the double doors that led to the main corridor. The floor wax smell thickened and the light grew whiter. A volunteer pushed a cart with folded blankets and a vase of fake sunflowers that had collected dust on the tips like frost. She set her duffel down for a moment, flexed her fingers, then lifted it back up. She could feel the pressure behind her eyes, the warm burn that came after a long night. She blinked until it cleared. Overhead, the static of the hospital intercom kicked once like a radio catching a station. A tone sounded. It was the kind of tone that made shoulders rise before the words even arrived. Attention all departments, mass trauma alert. Multi-vehicle collision eastbound on Interstate 10. Multiple casualties inbound. Estimated time of arrival 8 minutes. All available staff report to emergency. The voice repeated the words, flattening into rhythm. Elena did not move. The duffel strap snugged in the notch of her collarbone. The fluorescent tube over her head hummed a little louder, then steadied. Footsteps started somewhere above. Carts rolled. Old doors banged. The hospital breathed in. Elena lifted her eyes to the far window where morning sun pushed hard against the glass. The desert outside went on in strips of color. Pale sky, brown cinder block, a smear of red dirt along the curb where someone's shoes had knocked it loose. She looked down at her boots. The laces were still perfect. She bent and ran her thumb along one eyelet, a habit she could not shake. Leather, stitch line, salt at the seam. The watch on her wrist clicked once and then again. The intercom tone sounded a second time. All available staff to emergency. Repeat. All available staff to emergency. Elena stood still in the bright hall and listened. She was no longer available staff. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, opened them, and tightened the duffel strap in her fist. The clock above the nurse's station ticked one more second. Then another. The third second landed like a starting gun. The hallway filled with running. Elena did not move. The ultrasound in the room behind her chirped thin and insistent. The light over her head flickered and held. The second hand lifted and clicked forward. The intercom voice spoke again. ETA 7 minutes. Elena inhaled once through her nose. Antiseptic. Coffee from the volunteer cart. A thread of burning dust from the generator test still hanging in the vents. She picked up her bag. She turned toward the stairwell. The door pushed open on a metal bar, and the air inside smelled cooler concrete and old paint. Somewhere above, a door slammed, and a voice called for an intubation cart. Elena's heel found the first step. The boot sole felt the grit at the edge. She looked back along the hallway. The fake sunflowers nodded in the air from the AC vent. The blanket cart had bumped the wall and left a scuff at shin height. 2 interns in pale blue walked past, quick whispering to each other with their faces already pulled tight. Elena touched the face of her watch. The second hand lifted and fell. She told herself to take another step. The stairwell hummed. The intercom spoke. ETA 6 minutes. She stood with one hand on the rail and one on the bag and tasted metal once more on her tongue. The hospital moved around her like weather rolling in from the hills. She listened to it come closer. She listened to her heartbeat. She did not move. The clock kept time. The tone sounded again. ETA 5 minutes. The concrete floor felt steady beneath her boots. The rail was cool under her palm. Elena looked down at the laces across her instep and tightened them by reflex. The knots cinched. The ends hung even. She lifted her head and did not look away from the door, back to the corridor. Somewhere up the line, a crash cart squealed. Somewhere else, a phone rang twice and then cut off. The intercom voice waited a breath and came in clear. All available staff to emergency. Elena stood very still. The second hand climbed. The tone faded into the hum of the building. In the procedure room behind her, the ultrasound chirped one last time. The light above her held. The air thinned. The hallway ran. The clock ticked. The alert kept counting. The hospital waited. And the seconds kept shrinking. The stairwell hummed. Elena held the rail and counted the seconds out of habit. 5 minutes. She let the breath go, turned on her heel, and pushed back through the door. The corridor was brighter now. Someone had propped the emergency doors open with a plastic wedge. Air moved fast through the gap, cool against the heat that came with bodies in motion. A gurney clattered past with a tech running behind a hand on the metal frame to steer. Voices stacked in the space above the noise, clipped and purposeful. Grace O'Malley met Elena halfway like she had never left. Clipboard under one arm, glove box in the other. Her eyes took in the duffel on Elena's shoulder, then the set of Elena's mouth. She did not smile, only tipped her head toward the double doors. Bay 5 needs eyes, Grace said. Low priority on paper, not low in person. I am not on staff, Elena said. Grace did not blink. You are a pair of steady hands. I will handle the rest. They pushed through. The automatic doors breathed open, and the emergency department opened like a stage under harsh light. The unit smelled like antiseptic and bleach under a metal edge. Monitors beeped in uneven chorus. Screens flashed vitals. Nurses moved from bay to bay, voices calm, even when their steps were not. Grace pointed with her chin. Bay 5, Daniel Ruiz, 49, construction, blunt chest from steering wheel, stable so far. Elena set her duffel under the charting counter and pulled a stethoscope from the pocket of her scrubs. She entered Bay 5 and let the curtain fall behind her. Daniel lay on a narrow bed with an oxygen cannula in place, face gray around the eyes. His fluorescent orange vest had cut open and lay under him like a flag. A paramedic had taped a line to his right arm. On the monitor, number sat inside green and blue boxes that said, safe to anyone glancing fast. Mr. Ruiz, Elena said, I am Dr. Vega. I am going to take a look. He tried to nod and winced. Feels tight on the right. Breath hurts. She listened along the anterior chest, then posterior, then again along the right side. Breath sounds there thinner than they should be. She rested her palm at the base of his throat and watched the small wave rise with each inhale. Jugular veins told truth if you knew them. Deep breath in, she said. Hand already on the blood pressure cuff. She watched the numbers fall more than they should with inspiration. She let the cuff deflate, listened again to the sound of blood and air. A small click from the monitor marked each beat. She checked his neck, again gentle pressure with 2 fingers. The distension was modest. The story was not. Grace parted the curtain and stepped inside. She caught Elena's eye and moved to the counter. You see it? Grace said, not as a question. Subtle, Elena said. But it is there. Call it, Grace said. Slow pericardial fluid, Elena said. Developing tamponade. He will drop suddenly. Grace set the clipboard down. He needs a pericardial tap. Now, Elena said. I will get you a tray, Grace said. Daniel's eyes were on Elena's face, wide and dark. What is happening, he said. Am I dying? You have fluid around your heart, Elena said, voice level. I can drain it with a needle. It will relieve the pressure. I need your permission. He took one shallow breath, then another. Will it hurt? Yes, Elena said, but it will help you breathe. He nodded once, the smallest motion. Do it. Grace had the tray in a blink. Chlorhexidine swab, sterile drapes lidocaine, a long needle attached to a syringe. Elena pulled the portable ultrasound closer. The battery light glowed amber and chirped once a thin plea. The screen came to life, grain resolving into gray and black. She turned the probe to the subxiphoid view and angled toward the left shoulder. There it was, that dark shape along the ventricle that did not belong. Local, Grace said, handing over the syringe. Elena injected lidocaine just below the point of the sternum. Daniel flinched, then exhaled. Hands on your belly, Elena said. Stay still. She kept one eye on the image and one on the field. The needle slid in under the costal margin, through skin and fascia. She felt the small shift when the tip reached the pericardium, the syringe filled with dark blood that did not spurt. Elena drew back slowly and steadily. 50 milliliters. 100. The monitor registered the change, first a tick upward in the pressure, a slight ease in the heart rate. Daniel's shoulders sank as the muscles let go, and he took the first full breath he had managed since the crash. The ultrasound chirped again like it was proud of itself and dimmed a notch. Elena kept the needle steady and drew a little more. 200. Enough. She removed the needle and put firm pressure on the puncture site with sterile gauze. The curtain snapped aside. Dr. Whitaker filled the gap, his expression fixed cold. His gaze took in the tray, the ultrasound, the gauze under Elena's hand. He looked beyond her to the monitor and the numbers that had stopped falling. "You have been told to leave this department," Whitaker said. "You are terminated. You do not put needles in people in my unit." Grace shifted her weight and kept her mouth shut. Elena did not step back. She handed the syringe to Grace and picked up the ultrasound probe to freeze the image. The dark ring was smaller now. The heart moved with real work. "He was decompensating," Elena said. "He is not now." Whitaker did not look at the screen. He flicked a glance at Daniel, then back to Elena. "Out," he said. The intercom cut over him with a tone. Sirens bled into the bay from the ambulance ramp. The first gurney came in like a wave breaking white. 2 paramedics called numbers and words as they moved. Male, 32 gunshot to right chest, anterior, entry, posterior, exit low. 2 placed in the field. 2 units, O-neg running, pressures tanking. Bay 1 Grace called already moving. Dr. Patel ran past with gloves half on. The second ambulance arrived 2 breaths later with a young woman holding her abdomen and whispering a name that sounded like a child's. A third brought a man screaming through his teeth, a tourniquet high on his thigh, and blood dried to a rust color from knee to hip. The 4th gurney rolled in at a different speed. The man sitting on it wore an army dress shirt gone dark at the right shoulder where the bandage had bled through. He held himself still even when the wheels bumped the threshold. His hair was cut high and clean. He looked around like he was taking readings. "Captain Ethan Morales," the paramedic said. "Through and through to the right shoulder. No pneumothorax in the field. Vitals stable. He refused military transport. Wants to make a statement to Federal." "Bay 6, Grace said. She shot Elena a look that carried weight. "Manage the shoulder. That is it." Elena finished taping a clean dressing over Daniel's puncture site and checked his vitals one more time. "You will breathe easier now," she said. "We will keep you close." He blinked slow. "Thank you." Elena stepped into the hall and cut toward Bay 6. The captain was off the gurney and onto the bed, already jaw tight. The sling had been tied cleanly. Blood had tracked down his forearm and dried along the wrist bones like a line of ink. "I am Dr. Vega," she said. "I'm going to look at your shoulder and clean this up." He reached out with his uninjured hand and caught her wrist before she could move. Not hard, just enough to stop motion. "I know you," he said. "You do not," Elena said. "Ramadi," he said. "Field Hospital near Route, Michigan, 2019. IED took our lead truck. You cracked my chest open on a stretcher because the generator was dead, and you ran out of light. You told me to count breaths out loud so I would not pass out." The room shifted a degree under Elena's feet. She kept her face still and her voice neutral. "You took a shot in the shoulder today," she said. "Your memory is working fine, and that is good. I am here to clean the wound." "You were a major," he said. "Major Vega." "I remember the name because you wrote it on my chart in black marker, and the ink bled through to the next page. I remember the smell of diesel. I remember your hands not shaking." He let go of her wrist. The monitor behind him beeped a steady line. Somewhere close, someone called for more O-neg and a chest tube tray. Elena cleaned around the entry site and checked the exit along the back of the shoulder blade. No bubbling at the edges. Breath sounds even. Lucky angle. Curtains snapped and voices rose. Dr. Patel's voice from Bay 1 carried a high wire note. "Suction is full. I cannot get the bleed to stop. Tube is not draining." Dr. Lila Monroe in Bay 2 called for a second suction canister in a retractor voice, steady but thin. Dr. Omar Rafiq in Bay 3 cursed softly in a language that did not belong to this desert and asked for a vascular clamp he could not yet place. The hallway tightened as more bodies shoved into the same space. The automatic doors at the entrance hissed and sighed in a rhythm. Blood smell spread under the antiseptic like a rough blanket. The lights hummed and clicked. Somewhere off to the side, the ultrasound chirped from low battery again. Captain Morales watched Elena without blinking. "They need you," he said, quiet now. "Not the shoulder doctor. The other one." "I am not a major," Elena said. "Not anymore." "That is just a stripe on a sleeve," he said. "Hands are hands." Elena set down the saline and tape and picked up a sterile strip. She closed the entry wound with a practiced pressure and laid a clean dressing. She wrote Captain Morales on the tape in neat block letters. Not her name. From Bay 1, the sound came like a blade pulled long across stone. A flat line that peeled the noise down to a narrow line and made everything else recede. Dr. Patel spoke to the room, and the room did not speak back. Elena looked toward the curtain as if she could see through it. She felt the watch move under her skin. Tick, tick again. Her boots found the tile with a kind of memory, the soles knowing the way before the mind agreed. Captain Morales shifted his weight on the bed. "Go," he said. Elena tucked the roll of tape into the pocket of her scrubs. She turned out of Bay 6 and stepped into the current. The corridor drew her in like water. Grace's head appeared at the nurse's station, and she lifted one hand, a question without words. Elena answered by moving faster. The flat line kept singing. The cart by Bay 1 stood open drawers, gaping tools, bright and waiting. Dr. Patel stood at the foot of the bed with both hands lifted, eyes on the open chest that showed too much red and not enough motion. Elena reached the curtain and pushed it aside. Bay 1 smelled like iron and plastic. The officer's chest was open under lights that made his skin look waxed. Blood pooled along the ribs, and the chest tube on the right side burped weakly and quit. Dr. Patel stood at the foot of the bed, gloved hands, hovering eyes flicking from the hole between the ribs to the flat green line on the monitor. "Report," Elena said. He swallowed. "Massive hemothorax, tube placed but not draining. I cannot visualize the source. He flatlined 90 seconds ago." "Rib spreader," Elena said to no one and to everyone. Grace was there as if the thought had called her, laying a tray beside the drape. Scalpel. Curved mayo. Spreaders that looked like a small iron gate. Elena set her fingers along the 5th intercostal space and cut. The blade moved clean and sure. She placed the spreader and began to crank. Metal teeth bit and the ribs opened with a small creak. A wash of warm blood lifted and ran. She reached in. The world narrowed to touch and sound. Her hand felt along bone and muscle and found the artery that should have been smooth, but was not. A nick along an intercostal vessel that let out its story in steady red. "Clamp," she said. Grace dropped metal into her palm without looking. Elena closed on the nick and the bleeding slowed, then stuttered, then stopped. She looked to Patel. "Hands on the heart," she said. He froze for a heartbeat. Then he reached into the cavity fingers around the left ventricle. He began to squeeze steady and firm a rhythm that gave the monitor something to follow. The flat line twitched, hiccuped, then shaped into a thin rhythm, weak, but there. "Good," Elena said. "Keep that pace. We move to the OR when transport is ready." She packed the torn lung with gauze to hush the lesser bleeds and tied the clamped vessel with suture that appeared at her hand. The officer's pressure crept upward in cautious steps. Patel did not look away from his task. "You got him back," he said barely above a whisper. "We bought time," Elena said. She stepped out of the blood shadow and stripped her gloves as she crossed to Bay 2. The curtain was half open. Dr. Lila Monroe stood over a woman whose abdomen lay open under drape and light. The field was a red map. Lila's face shone with sweat that pooled along the edge of her mask. "Entry left upper quadrant," Lila said as Elena came in. "Blood in the peritoneum. I cannot see the source. Pressure is falling." "Suction," Elena said, taking the wand and clearing a path. She let her hand do the looking. Spleen torn, but the flow did not match what her palm felt. The bleed was deeper. She slid along the back wall of the abdomen with 2 fingers and felt a pulse that should have been steady, but flickered and spat. "High splenic artery," Elena said. "Proximal, clamp above and below." "There is no 4-0, a nurse said. "Supply is late." 3-0 will do, Elena said. "Pledge it with rolled gauze." She clamped high with one hand and low with the other, then eased the tear into view. The artery looked like a red mouth. She placed small stitches with patient hands and did not let the lack of perfection touch her voice. "Hold suction," she said. The bleeding slowed to a thread, then to nothing. She felt the pulse, distal to the repair, wake up. On the monitor, the pressure rose a shy climb. "Pack and cover," Elena said. "Call vascular for formal repair. She can make the trip now." Lila watched Elena's hands as if they were telling her a story. Her shoulders lowered by degrees. "How did you find it by feel?" she said. "Practice," Elena said. "You will too." She moved to Bay 3. The man on the bed was pale past gray. A tourniquet bit deep into his thigh. Dr. Omar Rafiq had a wound open mid-thigh and blood that pooled and ran thick as paint. "I cannot find the proximal end," he said. It retracted. Elena set her hand at the groin and felt for the heat and push of life under skin. There. The vessel above the damage. She cut a small line just below the inguinal crease and slid fingers into the plane where anatomy was meant to glide. Metal touched her palm. She placed the clamp on the femoral proximal to the injury and closed it. The bleeding stopped as if someone had turned a valve. The room let out a breath. "Thank you," Omar said, voice rough with adrenaline. "Finish exposure," Elena said. "Vascular is coming. You have time?" She stepped back and wiped her face with the inside of her forearm. Her pulse was high. Her hands were steady. It occurred to her somewhere under the noise that the hospital lights had stopped flickering. or she had stopped seeing it. The emergency department had changed around her. The air felt more solid. People moved with a direction that had been missing a few minutes ago. Dr. Whitaker stood at the central station with the posture of a man who had been moved back a step without choosing it. He watched Elena and did not speak. "Get or 1 and 2 ready," Grace called. "Thoracic and vascular. Move." Elena turned and felt the shift land inside her ribs. Not relief, not triumph, nothing clean, just the known weight of decisions that had been made and bodies that were now still alive. Voices cut across the floor in a register that did not match the rest. 3 people in suits entered from the ambulance ramp as if the air itself had parted. 2 had badges on their belts. The 3rd wore a service pin that did not belong to any hospital. The lead man had gray at the temples and an economy of movement that read law. "Dr. Elena Vega," he said, holding up a credential. "Special Agent Carter Hale, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The woman beside him spoke before Elena could answer. "Colonel Dana McKenna, Department of Defense Medical Command." Whitaker found his voice. "This is a working emergency department. You cannot just walk in here." Hale kept his eyes on Elena. "We have been looking for you." Grace slid closer to Elena without touching her. Her eyes pinned to the badges, then back to the bays where pumps hummed and monitors chimed. Elena kept her voice flat. "You can watch from there. People are still bleeding." Hale nodded once as if she had passed a test he had brought with him. He lifted a tablet and glanced at the screen. "Elena Vega," he said. 8 years United States Army Medical Corps, 3 combat deployments, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, 617 documented surgeries in field conditions. Silver Star, 3 bronze, Purple Heart. You resigned 6 months ago. You then omitted military trauma from your civilian application to this hospital. McKenna's eyes softened a degree. "You were one of our best," she said. "We wanted to understand why you stepped away." Elena felt her jaw set. "I am busy." Hale did not look away. "Private Tyler Brooks," he said, 19, killed in action during mass casualty in Kandahar. After action report cleared you. The report was classified and is now public. His mother wrote a statement that you should see. She wants to thank you. Grace's hand moved a fraction as if to catch something that might fall. Across the room, Whitaker spoke into the space like a man working through the afterimage of his own decisions. "You saved 4 people in under 10 minutes, he said. Not quite to her and not quite to himself. "I did not see it. I was not ready." Elena looked at him. His eyes were not cold now. They looked tired. It did not change what needed doing. "Director Whitaker," Elena said, "this unit needs clear command in a mass event. I am taking it." For a moment the room held its breath as if the building itself listened. Whitaker nodded once, a small tilt. "Proceed," he said. Elena returned to Bay 1. The officer's chest remained open. Patel still had his hands on the heart, working a rhythm with something like prayer in it. The monitor's line showed a thin pattern that wobbled and then smoothed. "Good work," Elena said. "Call transport. He goes to thoracic now." Patel lifted his eyes. Sweat had carved small roads down his temple. "I froze," he said. "You hesitated," Elena said. "Next time cut." He nodded and swallowed something hard. He kept the rhythm a minute longer, then traded to the transport team when they rolled in. Elena stepped back into the center of the floor. Hale and McKenna stayed where she had told them. They watched with a kind of professional stillness that did not interfere. Grace moved like someone conducting without a baton. Lila called vitals. Omar secured his clamp. The noise evened out. The officer's monitor chirped a new sound that sliced through the moment. The rhythm dissolved into chaos. The screen showed the quivering muscle of a heart that had lost its story. V-fib. The pressure dropped. The man on the table shifted color toward ash. "Back in," Elena said, moving without waiting. She set the ultrasound probe against the open chest and angled until the gray image showed the ventricle. A dark crescent pressed against it from the pericardium. Slow fluid had become fast pressure. "Window," Elena said. "Pericardial, now." Grace had the tray before the sentence ended. Scissors, retractor, suture on a small needle, a square of felt that could serve as a pledget in a pinch. Elena set the blade at the soft tissue just below the sternum. She felt the give as she cut through layers that had names she did not say out loud. The membrane bulged with a fullness that did not belong. She opened a small window and blood spilled dark and heavy. The heart bounced under her fingers, still chaotic. She found the small line of oozing along the right ventricle where repair had seeped. Her finger steadied. The room tightened to a single point. 40 proline, she said, and the suture landed in her palm. She set the first bite and tied it down. The needle bit silk through muscle, and the heart kicked under Elena's fingers like a startled bird. She set the second bite, pulled the figure of 8 snug against the small pledget, and tied it down. The monitor stuttered, then found a rhythm that held. Pressure crept up in cautious steps. Color returned to the officer's lips, as if painted back by an invisible hand. Again, Elena set eyes on the oozing seam along the right ventricle. Grace passed another suture. Elena placed it clean-closed the weeping spot and watched the gray crescent on ultrasound shrink back. The ventricle filled and emptied with purpose. The quiver faded. The line marched in a steady left to right like a band back in time. Sinus Patel breathed more to his own hands than to anyone else. Good, Elena said. Thoracic gets him now. The transport team slid in and took the rails. Patel held the heart a few beats more, then yielded to the nurse at the head, who kept the airway smooth. The rib spreader came out with the soft whine of metal backing down. Gauze packed, drapes secured, the gurney rolled. The room exhaled. The overhead lights felt less harsh. Sound reorganized into work instead of panic. Elena lifted her gloves by the cuffs and peeled them off. Blood traced a line on one wrist where a splash had leapt the barrier. She wiped it with a sterile towel and felt the salt sting her skin. The watch under the band thumped at its own small pace. She looked across the unit. Lila Monroe nodded from Bay 2, field packed and pressure rising. Omar Rafiq bent over his patient with vascular assistance, now at his shoulder clamps placed where they needed to be. Daniel Ruiz lay quiet, chest rising steady, a rectangle of clean tape at the base of his sternum. Special Agent Carter Hale and Colonel Dana McKenna waited where Elena had left them. Professional stillness, not indifference. Whitaker stood near the central computer, hands on the edge of the desk, jaw set. He looked like a man who had put down a weight he had been carrying wrong. Elena washed her hands at the scrub sink by the door. The water ran hot, then warm. She watched blood ribbon down the drain and lift with the soap. When she turned, Hale was closer, but not in the way. The report on Private Tyler Brooks, he said low enough to keep it between them. It cleared you. His mother's statement is on file. She wrote that 6 men came home because you made the choices you did. Elena held the edge of the counter and felt the laminate under her fingers. A smell rose in the back of her throat that did not belong to this clean place. Diesel. Hot canvas. A flicker of grit across teeth. Tyler's face had been too young for the words he spoke. He had asked her to tell his mother something simple and ordinary. She had not remembered the sentence, only the sound of his breath slowing. I know what the report says, she said. McKenna stepped in. We are not here to drag you back. We came because talent like yours should not end at a door marked human resources. Elena glanced toward Grace. Grace's eyes asked the same question in fewer words. Are we done bleeding out? The unit held its line. For the moment, yes. Whitaker moved forward. He stopped at a respectful distance. This was a different man than the one in the conference room. There was color in his face now, but it did not come from anger. I was wrong, he said. The words were simple and shaped well. I saw insubordination where there was judgment. I saw liability where there was skill. You saved 3 dying patients and stabilized a 4th in minutes. This department needed you. I was not ready to admit that. Elena looked at him without giving him anything he had not earned. He lifted a folded letter from his coat and set it on the counter between them, not touching her hand. This is an offer, he said. Director of Trauma Innovation and Military-Civilian Integration. Build training here that uses what you know. You would set curriculum, pick staff, control budget. You would have authority to act in events like this. A drip landed on the letter. Elena realized it was water from her wrist, not blood. She stepped back and left the paper where it was. I am not signing anything in a hallway, she said. No, Whitaker said, you are not. Silence pooled for a breath. The monitor in Bay 2 beeped a high, then settled low. Someone laughed in a quick burst that sounded like relief and then disappeared. Elena felt the pull from inside that had lived in her for 6 months. A box she had kept wrapped a knot she had left alone. She pictured the black cloth inside her locker, the corners turned from being tied and untied in memory only. She wiped her hands dry and left the letter on the counter. I need 3 things, she said. Whitaker's eyes did not leave hers. Name them. This program cannot be a club, Elena said. We train anyone who can do the work. Military medics, EMS, residents, attendings from other hospitals, international physicians who bring their own field craft. If they have hands and a head for it, they get a place. Whitaker nodded once. There is more, Elena said. I want a team that moves. When the city calls, we answer. A rapid response group ready to deploy beyond this building when the event is bigger than a unit can hold. Whitaker's mouth twitched like he was already pulling lines through a budget. He nodded again. And the last, Elena said. The words came slow not because she did not know them, but because she needed them set right. We name the fellowship for Tyler Brooks. His name belongs on the wall where people learn to keep others breathing. McKenna's shoulder lowered a fraction. Hale looked away for the first time not out of rudeness, but to give the moment a small corner of privacy. Whitaker did not hesitate. Agreed, he said. All of it. Elena made herself breathe and felt how shallow it had been. She picked up the letter and slid it into her pocket without opening it. Back in 5, she told Grace. Grace tipped her head. 4, she said, because that was how she told someone to hurry without a shout. Elena walked to the locker room. The hallway felt different from earlier, as if the light had warmed by a degree. Her boots marked the tile in soft taps. The door to the locker bay swung on a tired hinge. Locker 312 opened as if it had been waiting. The black cloth sat where she had left it. She took it in both hands and felt the familiar weave. She unwrapped it, and the wood showed smooth and oiled by palms. The lid lifted on a tiny sigh. Inside lay a dog tag on a length of chain and a small patch of red dust trapped in a sealed tube no longer than her finger. The metal tag read, Brooks Tea. The letters were old and patient. Elena balanced the tag in her palm and let the chain run over her knuckles. The metal warmed. She set it back gently, closed the lid, and wrapped the cloth again. Not to hide. To carry. When she returned to the unit, the noises aligned into a rhythm she recognized. The swing doors at the ambulance bay bumped in and out with a pulse. The chart printers rattled little flags of paper. Grace was at the center like a keel. Hale and McKenna had stepped aside to a narrow strip of wall, nowhere to go and no need to move. Elena slid the letter into her locker scrub pocket and came back to the desk. Whitaker waited. He did not reach out a hand. She did. Their grip was brief and firm. Your boots belong in my department, he said, voice flat with conviction. They leave prints I can trust. Grace cleared her throat as if to cut a thread that could tighten too far. We have 1 to CT, 1 to thoracic, 1 to vascular, she said. Bay 5 remains here. Stable. Captain Morales stood in Bay's 6 shoulder rebandaged eyes on the room. He lifted a 2-finger salute that was not regulation for any branch and let his hand fall. Elena gave him a small nod. He gave one back. The overhead speaker clicked. Static rolled once like distant thunder. The tone that followed was a different pitch from earlier. It filled the room and made the ceiling feel closer by an inch. Attention all departments, the voice said. Mass casualty alert. Train derailment on the South Tempe line. Multiple critical patients. Estimated time of arrival 6 minutes. All available staff report to emergency. The words layered themselves over everything that had just settled. Carts moved without anyone calling for them. Shoes hit tile. Doors opened. The unit inhaled again deeper this time. Elena checked the strap on her watch. She set her hand on the counter to feel the vibration in the building as the ramp doors were propped and the first sirens turned toward the bay. She looked at Grace. A sign bay, she said. Grace was already calling names. The speakers kept speaking. The hospital leaned forward. The second hand climbed and clicked. The smell of dust rode in through the vents. Elena tied her laces with one clean pull and stepped toward the doors. The sirens folded into the building and brought heat with them. The first wave from the South Tempe derailment rolled through the doors, metal wheel noise still ringing in the bones of every patient. Diesel hung in the air sharp as pennies on the tongue. Primary triage at the ramp, Elena said. Red tags inside yellow to the far hall greens to chairs with fluids. Her voice cut clean and carried. Grace echoed assignments without looking at her notes. A paramedic shouted over the clatter. Male mid-30s, blunt chest from impact, shallow breath sat dropping. Bay 1, Elena said. Patel you Arches. Another gurney bumped the threshold. Female 20s penetrating abdomen, no exit tender left upper. Bay 2, Grace called. Monroe, take it. A third came fast behind. Male 50s thigh bleed tourniquet placed in field losing pressure. Omar, Bay 3, Elena said. Clamp proximal, call vascular. They moved. Doors slapped open and shut. Gloves snapped. The unit found a gate and held it. Elena triaged at the ramp for 10 minutes that felt like 3. Broken glass glittered in seat cushions. A child with a split lip clutched a stuffed cat with one ear. A man in a reflective vest kept saying he had been asleep and woke to sky. Elena pressed gauze where it would help scent bodies where they belonged and bent over a rail car worker whose breath whistled through blood. She pushed a needle between ribs and heard the hiss of trapped air leaving. He smiled with his eyes and coughed. Inside she roved. Patel had a young man open for a tube thoracostomy and cursed under his breath when the drainage bogged. Elena stood at his shoulder long enough to watch him switch to a second location. He found the pocket of blood and the tube filled and ran. He did not look up. He did not need her to. Lila placed a hand under the spleen and frowned. Elena slid in, showed her the angle to lift and feel along the back wall. Lila's eyes changed as the pulse taught her, and she placed the clamp where it belonged. Blood slowed, then stopped. "Pack and move," Elena said, and Lila nodded, already calling for transport. Omar had a clamp high and a second lower, sweat dripping into his mask, but his hand steady. Vascular stepped in and matched him stitch for stitch. Elena turned when a nurse at Bay 5 lifted 2 fingers, a question. Daniel Ruiz breathed without fighting it. The rectangle of tape at his sternum was clean. She raised her hand back and kept moving. The second wave arrived. Green tags needed chairs and salts and someone to say words that would hold them up. Yellow tags needed imaging and quiet hands. Reds needed rooms and blood. Elena kept the board in her head and on the wall. She spoke, Grace translated, and the unit went where she pointed. By noon, the room's noises had flattened out. Sirens had become distant. The smell of diesel thinned. Monitors beeped in patterns that promised work rather than loss. Transport rolled one to thoracic, then another to vascular. A CT nurse called out a set of clean scans, and a tech wheeled a boy to sutures, where a student waited with shaky confidence in a teacher's hand at his elbow. Elena leaned at the sink for a beat and watched water slip red and then pink and then clear. She looked up and saw her own face in the steel. There were lines there that had not been there in August. They belonged. Grace touched her sleeve. "Numbers look good," she said. "We did not drown." "We had boats," Elena said, eyes back on the floor. They cleaned the last bay and changed drapes. A nurse brought a tray of paper cups with lukewarm coffee, and someone laughed when the sugar ran out. The engine of the hospital idled in a tone that made shoulders drop. 3 months later, the room smelled like dry erase marker and new carpet instead of bleach. The education wing's lecture hall filled with the sound of plastic chairs and low voices. A whiteboard read, "Tyler Brooks Trauma Fellowship" in tall block letters. Under it, a photograph of a young man in a dress uniform watched the front with an expression that dared anyone to waste time. Elena stood in front of 12 people, 2 attendings from Tucson and Flagstaff, 4 residents from here and 1 from across town, 2 former medics who had traded fatigues for name badges, 2 international physicians whose vows carried rain from somewhere far from the desert. Dr. Noah Patel sat front row, pen ready. "Today we cover damage control when time does not care how prepared you feel," Elena said. "We will use the simulation lab, then we will get our hands on tissue drills." Her voice was not a lecture voice. It was the same voice she used when the board filled with red tags. She pulled the sheet from the mannequin in the bay behind the glass and clicked the timer clipped to her pocket. "Flat line in the ambulance," she said. "You have 2 minutes to make the decision, 3 to move your hands through it. Dr. Patel walked them through what you see. Then work." Patel stood. He did not look at the clock. He looked at the chest. He made the cut. He placed the rib spreader, found the vessel, clamped it, and started direct massage. The timer read 3 minutes and 28 seconds when the simulated rhythm returned. "Again," Elena said. He nodded and reset on his own. They rotated through scenarios. Lila showed the class how to lift the spleen without tearing it further. Omar demonstrated proximal control with a shadow clamp and a strip of red tape standing in for a friable artery. The medics taught a trick with tape and a pen cap that made a stopgap shunt when the tray came up empty. The room learned faster. The door opened and a woman with gray at her temple stood in the threshold as if catching her breath. She held a handbag with both hands like it might float away. Elena knew before she spoke. "I am Renee Brooks," the woman said, "Tyler's mom." The room shifted, chairs squeaked. The fellows looked at their hands or their shoes. Elena walked down off the small stage and met her halfway. "Mrs. Brooks," Elena said, "thank you for coming." Renee set the bag on the front row chair and took Elena's hands between her own. Her skin was cool. "I read the report when they told me I could," she said. "The words are hard to hold on to. I know he was too hurt. I know you saved the others." Elena did not answer with words. Renee's eyes moved to the photograph and the plaque under it, where the fellowship's name was set in clean letters. Her mouth folded into a shape that was not a smile and not a cry. "He used to leave his boots by the back door," she said, looking at the picture. He would forget to knock the dirt out, and I would trip on them. I do not mind remembering that. Elena guided her to a chair. The fellows offered small nods that were not pity. They were weight-shared across a floor designed to take it. A man in a navy suit came in carrying a folder with FEMA stamped on it in blue. Luis Navarro introduced himself at a respectful volume and waited for Renee to settle before he spoke to Elena. "We have been watching your numbers," he said. "Penetrating trauma survival up 34%. Time to critical intervention down measurably. We have a program we want to roll out. 50 hospitals in 25 states, 500 physicians trained on this model." Elena looked past him at the fellows. Patel wiped a bit of ink from his hand, and the medic from Yuma adjusted the strap on his watch. Lila spoke to the international surgeon in a mix of English and Spanish, and their hands made the same shapes in the air. The class looked like motion already. "We will share our manuals," Elena said. "The rest they will learn with their hands." Navarro passed the folder over. It had weight. Paper and signatures had a feel that keyboards could not copy. He shook her hand and stood off to the side, more observer than guest. The intercom in the hall clicked. Sound rolled in like weather through an open window. The voice sat in the chest as much as the ear. "Attention all departments. Mass casualty alert. Interstate bus rollover eastbound on the 10. Multiple critical patients. Estimated arrival 6 minutes." The room stood as one without scraping chairs. Bags zipped, pens went away. Elena raised a palm and the movement paused. "Pair with someone you have not worked with today," she said. "Translate fast. Think with your fingers and your eyes. Move." They went. In the emergency department, the air already buzzed. Grace pointed people where they needed to be. Bay 1 chest. Bay 2 abdomen. Bay 3 vascular. Bay 4 ortho. Bay 5 peds. Her voice went over the alarms and landed where it needed to land. The first gurney came in hard. Broken windshield glass clung to hair and clothes. A woman had a seatbelt burned straight across her sternum and purple rising under it. Patel met the stretcher, listened once, and made his call. He cut for an emergent chest tube and did not ask permission. The second gurney carried a man with a belly gone rigid and a gaze that had gone distant. Lila opened and found blood where it should not be. She lifted with the new angle and clamped with a hand that did not shake. Omar worked the groin of a teenager who had looked like a linebacker on Friday and looked like a patient on Sunday. The medic from Yuma handed him a shunt they had cobbled from tubing and tape when the tray came up short. It slid in and bought time. The international fellow from Lima heard breath roll wrong in a child and palsied fingers that had craned to the window when the bus rolled. He placed a needle into a small chest, and a hiss came out that made a sound like thanks. Elena walked the middle. She put a hand where doubt lived, shifted a wrist. Here sat a clamp there, but mostly she watched the line hold. Grace tracked the board with a dry marker until it squeaked. Whitaker stood at the end of the central station and did not obstruct anyone's view. The unit hummed. Sirens faded, ramps rolled. The smell of dust lifted and settled along the edges of the lights. The timer in Elena's pocket clicked without her needing it to. Renee stood at the back beside Navarro and held her handbag like a small anchor. She watched hands move and listened to voices speak in the tone that people use when fear is not in charge. By late afternoon, the carts were reloaded. The floors had new scuffs. The glass doors had clean handprints up high where someone had steadied a head of hair full of glass. The fellows wrote notes with cramped hands and checked orders twice. The board had fewer red tags. Elena stood at the foot of Bay 4 and looked at what the room had made. She felt the weight of the dog tag in the pocket of her lab coat and the scrape of sand caught in the weave of the black cloth. She tightened her laces without looking. Grace came up alongside and bumped her shoulder. "Your class works," she said. "They do," Elena said. They stood there and listened to the building breathe. A monitor in the corner beeped at a heart that had decided to continue. Carts clicked as drawers settled. Someone somewhere started to sing, under their breath, half a song with more rhythm than tune. Elena glanced up at the clock. The second hand climbed. It paused. It jumped forward. She let her hand rest on the rail of the bed and felt the metal cool under her palm. The boots on her feet held the floor. The dust in the vents gave the air a taste she knew. The ultrasound on the rolling stand blinked a green light that meant it was finally charging. She looked at the doors as the next set of wheels came in and stepped toward the work. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.